My name is Eliana Brooks, and this year, my own parents shattered a champagne bottle across my head at my brother's 40th birthday party because I refused to hand over the deed to my $450,000 condo in East Austin. But that brutal moment was just the tip of a much deeper betrayal. Long before the bottle, they had already begun erasing me. From photos, from invitations, from the story of our family. It started on a warm Sunday evening in San Antonio. The kind of evening where the golden hour draped everything in a false sense of serenity. I pulled into my parents' cul-de-sac behind a fleet of Teslas and Range Rovers, my modest Toyota sedan clearly the odd one out. The valet barely glanced at me as he opened the door. I stepped out in a simple navy dress, pearl studs, no designer, tags, just intention, just effort. In my hand was a monogrammed pen set I had custom ordered for my brother, Landon Brooks, the beloved eldest son, the Reynolds family star. Laughter spilled from the porch like poured champagne. The house had been transformed. String lights danced in the trees, a jazz trio played near the koi pond, and the scent of cedar-planked salmon curled through the air like a promise. At the entrance, a young man with a clipboard asked for my name. Eliana Brooks, I replied, adjusting the gift bag. He scanned the list, paused, and turned the sheet toward me. I blinked. There it was, in clear, careful font. +1. Guest of Reynolds family. No individual mention. Just an afterthought. My chest tightened, but I smiled anyway. Guess I'm the lucky +1. I pinned the generic guest badge to my chest, right over my heart. It tugged at the fabric like a silent warning. Inside, the home shimmered like a showroom. Chandeliers dangled like floating constellations. Silk tablecloths, crystal place settings. Every corner whispered of celebration. Just not for me. When I reached the guest list table, I searched for my name again, hoping it had been a mistake. But no. My seat was tucked at table 18, behind a thick column near the kitchen door, far from the head table where Landon stood like a king among his court. And yet, I told myself it was fine. I had grown used to being seated in the shadows, used to folding napkins perfectly and hoping to be noticed. But nothing could prepare me for what was waiting just behind that dessert cart, what they had planned not out of ignorance but with intention. Table 18 was practically invisible. It sat behind a structural column, right next to the swinging kitchen doors where servers barked, "Hot plate," and the scent of garlic butter fought with the metallic sting of industrial cleaner. I lowered myself into the chair, feeling the fabric of my dress catch slightly on the badge still pinned to my chest. The place setting in front of me was off, the silverware crooked. The folded napkin, a limp attempt at a swan, slouched forward, half unraveled, like it had given up halfway through the evening. I reached to adjust it, more out of instinct than vanity. But when my fingers touched the soft linen, I hesitated. It felt symbolic, like a quiet, slumped version of myself, tucked behind a pillar, smiling politely while being erased in plain sight. Laughter echoed from the main ballroom. Applause. A new bottle of champagne hissed open somewhere near the head table. Delilah, my mother, stood beside Landon, her hand delicately resting on his shoulder, as if she were introducing royalty to the crowd. "This is our son," she beamed, her voice carrying across the room like a practiced campaign speech. "Regional VP in just 4 years. We couldn't be prouder." She didn't look in my direction once. Orson, my father, glanced over only once, his eyes scanning past me like I was part of the wall. He offered a slight nod. Not of affection, just recognition, like someone acknowledging a stranger they once passed in a hallway. Then he turned back to his conversation with a man in a tailored gray suit. I sipped my water, letting the cold anchor me to the moment. I thought about all the weekends I'd spent helping Landon with pitch decks, the $75,000 loan I wired him to keep his firm afloat, The nights I slept on the floor of his showroom while he rebuilt. None of it mattered now. Not in this room. Not at this table. The napkin brushed against my wrist again as another server whisked by. I looked down at it, creased, half-folded, forgotten, and something inside me cracked just slightly. Not enough to break, but enough to whisper, "You were never supposed to shine here." A voice rang out from the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, if we could all direct our attention to the front." The lights dimmed. My breath caught. The MC's voice continued, cheerful and sharp. "We now welcome someone very special, a sister whose heart is as big as her generosity. Please give it up for Eliana Brooks." Applause. Sparse at first, then polite. I froze. What? I hadn't prepared anything. I hadn't been told I'd speak. As I stood slowly, the room turned to look. I clutched my hands together to hide their tremble and walked toward the spotlight, each step tapping like a drumbeat against the silence building in my chest. Something was wrong, deeply wrong, and I hadn't even reached the microphone yet. The spotlight was just a little too bright. As I stepped onto the stage, the warmth of it burned across my face, not from heat, but humiliation. My hands clenched at my sides as I scanned the crowd, hoping, begging for context. But there were no cards, no notes, no whisper from the MC offering explanation. Just the sea of faces below me, some curious, others indifferent, waiting. Then the screen behind me lit up. A soft musical swell began. A montage rolled. At first it looked like a tribute. Landon in his Little League uniform, gripping a baseball bat twice his size. Landon at the science fair, beaming next to a papier-mâché volcano. Graduation, his first internship, then blueprints and mayoral handshakes, his architecture firm. Every scene curated with glossy perfection. And then came the narration. My mother's voice, crisp and syrupy. From the very beginning, Landon was destined for greatness. He was the light in every room, our foundation, our future. Then my father. You don't teach brilliance like his. It's born in you. I stood still, stoic, hands folded, smiling, because frowning would only prove them right, that I was sensitive, dramatic, difficult. But inside, I was splintering. No mention of the nights I helped him salvage crashed presentations. No mention of the $75,000 I wired during his first funding crisis. No sign of me in the background of those moments where I'd been the one behind. The camera holding his projects together with duct tape and hope. I had been edited out, erased. The video ended in gold cursive, a legacy in the making. The applause was louder now. Some people even stood. I stepped forward toward the mic, still unsure why I had been summoned. Then I saw her, Delilah, rising from her seat at the head table. She walked toward the stage in heels that didn't click but commanded. "And now," she said sweetly into the microphone, "a few words from our ever-thoughtful little sister." She turned to me, smiling. Too polished. Too rehearsed. Her voice was sugary, but her eyes were stone. That's when I knew. This wasn't a speech. It was a setup. I forced a breath into my lungs, reached for the mic, and began. "It's a beautiful night, and Landon, you've always had a gift for lighting up a room." I kept my voice even, controlled. My eyes flicked to Landon. He smiled thinly, arms crossed. Behind him, Thessaly, his new wife, looked frozen in place. Then Delilah laughed. Stage whispered into the microphone like we were sharing a private joke. "Oh, honey, tell them. Wouldn't it be the perfect gift if you handed over the condo keys? Tonight?" The room went still. Not the kind of stillness that falls. No, the kind that drops, like glass hitting marble. The kind that dares you to flinch. At first, I thought I had misheard her. That maybe I'd misunderstood the joke, or perhaps the heat of the spotlight had warped her words. But then I saw the way my mother smiled. Wide, glossy, deliberate. The kind of smile you give just before the trap snaps shut. She turned back to the crowd, still laughing softly. You all know the place, right? That beautiful condo in East Austin Eliana owns. 2 bedrooms, plenty of space, but she's always traveling for work. Doesn't it just make sense to pass it down to Landon and Thessaly? They're newlyweds. After all, the room didn't erupt. It inhaled, one long collective breath. I could hear a phone camera click. Forks paused midair. Someone coughed in the back. I gripped the edge of the microphone, unsure if I was being baited or just flat-out robbed in front of a live studio audience of well-dressed strangers. Then Orson added his voice from his seat, casual, as if talking business. Come on, Elle. It's just a formality. You're barely ever there. That guest room's been empty for months. And just like that, the ambush was complete. Not a suggestion. Not a request. A maneuver. Crafted so precisely that any refusal would brand me as selfish, cold, ungrateful. The whispers began, hushed voices behind champagne flutes and manicured nails. Eyes flicked to me, some sympathetic, some judgmental. But all watching, even Landon couldn't meet my gaze. He looked down at his plate. Thessaly's jaw was tight, but not surprised. This wasn't spontaneous. This had been discussed, maybe even rehearsed. Probably right after the florist finalized the centerpiece order. I leaned toward the mic, my voice low but cutting. This wasn't agreed on. A ripple moved through the room. The kind that carries both shock and discomfort. A woman at table 9 gasped. Someone near the bar muttered, "Yikes." But Delilah? She just waved a hand like I was being silly. Oh, don't be dramatic, sweetie. It's a gesture, a symbol of love, a legacy gift. And that was the moment I felt it. My body screaming to list every loan I'd ever given, every emergency bill I'd covered, every sacrifice I'd made while they flaunted my silence as compliance. I could have stood there and exposed it all. But I didn't. Instead, I looked at her, really looked. At the tilt of her head, the way her eyes watched for cracks, not connection. This wasn't love. This was performance. The same kind she had been perfecting my whole life. Someone whispered, "She won't say no. Not here. Not in front of everyone." But I did. Not with words. I set the microphone down with a quiet thud that sounded louder than any speech could have. Straightened my dress, smoothed the trembling in my fingers, and gave my mother a smile sharp enough to cut silk. I stepped off that stage with dignity, but I didn't know the worst part of the night still waited, just beyond the dessert table. I hadn't taken more than 3 steps off the stage before I saw him, Orson, my father, standing stone still near the dessert table, arms rigid, face set like wet cement drying in the sun. He wasn't looking at the cake. He wasn't even looking around to see who had noticed. He was staring directly at me. Behind him stood Delilah, holding a champagne flute, her lips barely moving as she hissed something under her breath. I couldn't hear all of it, but one word cracked through like a whip. Disgrace. I slowed, not because I was afraid, but because something in the air told me I was being cornered. I scanned the room quickly, looking for an ally. Thessaly? She avoided my eyes, sipping from her glass like it might make her disappear. Landon? Still seated, pretending the sear marks on his steak were of critical interest. That's when Orson moved. He reached for the neck of a half-empty champagne bottle on the dessert table. At first, I thought he was just going to pour himself a glass. But then, without a word, he swung it sideways. The thick bass struck the side of my temple, hard and fast. A white flash exploded behind my eyes. Not total blackout. More like a permanent camera flash. The kind that leaves a stain on your vision no matter how many times you blink. My knees buckled. Gasps echoed around the room. A phone dropped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God." Another voice. Did he just... No one stepped in. No one moved. Just a wall of frozen silhouettes holding wine and confusion. Blood trickled down my jaw like a warm betrayal. I pressed a shaking hand to my head, already feeling the wet heat soak through my fingers. The pain was sharp, yes, but the humiliation? That was nuclear. And still, Delilah didn't flinch. "We gave you everything," she hissed, her voice raised just enough for the guests nearby to hear. "This is how you repay us?" I couldn't even speak. Across the room, Jonah, my cousin from Dad's side, the one who always smelled like motor oil, shouted, "Someone call the police." But even he didn't step forward. Not one person crossed the distance between them and me. I stood on my own. My dress, light blue, once carefully ironed, was streaked red now. Blood had hit the marble floor in a pattern that looked like spilled wine on wedding china. A woman near the fruit platter whispered, "She's being dramatic, right?" "No." Someone else answered, their voice flat. "He hit her. I got it. On video." I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even raise my voice. I walked, past stunned faces, past my brother pretending to be invisible, past the woman he married who suddenly looked very small. Outside, the air felt cooler, quieter, as if the night itself had recoiled. My fingers trembled as I ordered an Uber. By the time it arrived, blood had dried along my cheek like a cruel scarlet thread. The driver's voice was wary. "You all right?" "Ma'am?" I didn't lie. I just said, "Hospital," and I shut the door behind me, not realizing I was also closing one on them, forever. The ER was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of sterile silence where even fluorescent lights feel like judgment. I sat on the examination cot, my head wrapped in gauze, the sting of antiseptic still clinging to my skin. A nurse with kind eyes asked if anyone was coming to pick me up. I shook my head. No, just me. She paused, nodded, like she had heard that answer too many times from women who walked in bleeding and left hole in every place but the soul. The pain pulsed behind my temple like a second heartbeat. But it wasn't the worst part. The worst part came hours later, after the paperwork was signed, after I climbed into the guest bed at Leah's house, my old college roommate who'd always left a light on for me. She hadn't asked many questions, just offered a mug of chamomile tea and a soft towel folded neatly beside the bed. I didn't touch either. I slid under the covers, shoes still on, and stared at the ceiling, letting the darkness hold me. My scalp throbbed with every heartbeat. But more than that, the ache was in my chest. A quiet, hollow throb where belonging used to live. Morning came slowly, filtered through linen curtains and the sputter of a neighbor's sprinkler system. For a moment I forgot where I was. Then I turned my head and the pain snapped me back. I reached for my phone on the nightstand. No text from Landon. No call from Delilah. Not even a fake apology from Orson. But there were notifications. Dozens. Emails. Mentions. Missed calls from numbers I didn't recognize. Someone had posted the video. The moment. The impact. The gasp. The blood. A shaky clip filmed by someone near the dessert table had made its way online. A former coworker messaged, "Is this real?" Another, "Was that your dad?" My hands trembled as I hit delete, then again, and again, trying to erase what had already been burned into the internet's memory. I forced myself to shower. The motion felt foreign, mechanical. I brushed my teeth, wincing with each tilt of my head. Then I reached into my purse for one small act of normalcy, my condo key. But it wasn't there. Wallet, lip balm, phone, receipts, even the half-eaten protein bar I'd forgotten from last week. No spare key. I dumped the contents onto the bed, scanning, searching, panicking. Nothing. That's when it hit me. A week ago, after a family dinner in Westlake, Orson had accidentally grabbed my bag, said it looked just like Delilah's, handed it back with that fake sheepish grin he always used when he wanted something, and now the key was gone. My phone vibrated, an unknown number. "Hi, Miss Brooks. This is Jeanette from HomeQuest Realty. Just confirming your 2 p.m. walkthrough at the condo. We'll meet at the entrance unless you prefer we use the lockbox." I froze. "I didn't schedule anything," I said, my voice sharp, trembling. "Oh, it's under your name. A Mr. Orson Brooks is listed as the co-signer." I hung up before she finished. They weren't just humiliating me anymore. They were trying to steal my life, piece by piece, silently, surgically. And I was done watching it happen. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't even pace the room. I just sat at the edge of Leah's guest bed, phone in one hand, the other fisting the sheet like it might anchor me from free fall. My breath was shallow. My mind? Racing. They weren't just humiliating me in front of strangers anymore. They were selling my condo, without my permission, using a key they'd stolen, and my name on the listing like it was theirs to barter with. I opened my laptop, the screen glowing, too bright for how dark the room felt. The cursor blinked in an empty email draft like it was daring me to act. And I did. To Marlowe, SteinbergLawFirmCo.com. Subject, urgent, possible real estate fraud. "Hi, Marlowe. We met briefly at last fall's networking brunch. I hope you remember me. I believe my parents are attempting to sell my condo without my consent. They somehow have a key, and I just received a call from a realtor confirming a walkthrough I never scheduled. I don't have all the proof yet, but something is very wrong. Can we talk?" Eliana Brooks, I hit send. Then I grabbed my coat. By noon, I stood outside my building in East Austin, next to a locksmith who looked like he'd seen this kind of thing before. He crouched near the knob, frowning. "See these scratches?" he said, pointing. "Fresh. Looks like someone's been in and out. Clumsy. Probably didn't know the exact angle for the key." My stomach churned. That was them. Confident enough to steal. Careless enough to get caught. "Can you change it?" "Absolutely," he said. "Want a deadbolt too?" I nodded, harder than I meant to. "Yes, and key copies for me only." As he drilled, I leaned against the hallway wall, arms folded, eyes locked on the doorknob like it might flinch. The sound of metal grinding was harsh, but necessary, like ripping out a thorn embedded too deep. When he finished, he handed me the new keys with a small smile. "She's secure now." But I wasn't. That night I didn't sleep. I reheated soup. I never ate. I sat in silence. Lights dimmed, the scent of metal and lubricant clinging to the air like smoke after a house fire. My phone buzzed at 8:42 a.m. from Delilah Brooks. Subject, "Let's talk, Eliana, we love you. This has gone far enough. Come by the house. No guests, just us. Let's fix this." Mom, I stared at it longer than I should have. And for one brief traitorous second, I felt that old ache, the one that begged for resolution, for a seat at the table. That hoped maybe, just maybe, they wanted to talk like family. But this wasn't family. This was war, dressed in linen and lemon tea. Still, I went. Not for them, but for closure. Their house looked exactly the same. Pristine lawn, trimmed hedges, solar lights lining the walkway like obedient soldiers. But the air felt wrong. Too quiet. Too practiced. Delilah opened the door before I even knocked, arms wide, smile warm. But it didn't reach her eyes. It was a smile rehearsed, not lived. "Eliana, baby," she said, pulling me into a hug that was exactly 3 seconds too long and 3 degrees too cold. "Thank you for coming." Inside, the living room had been staged. There's no other word for it. Fresh orchids on the coffee table. A lemon tea set laid out with shortbread cookies, my favorite. Photos of me as a child that I hadn't seen in years, suddenly reappearing like ghosts summoned for sympathy. Me and Landon at the lake, my high school debate final. Everything lit in soft, warm tones. It felt artificial, like a hotel lounge pretending to be a memory. Landon sat on the edge of the couch, hands folded, lips a flat line. He looked up, but didn't speak. Thessaly wasn't there. Delilah gestured to the plush armchair I always sat in on Christmas mornings. "Just us," she said. "We want to make things right." I didn't sit. A moment later, Orson emerged from the hallway holding a manila envelope. His expression was somewhere between polite and smug. "We've been thinking," he said smoothly, "about how to keep things fair and transparent. No more misunderstandings. So we had this drafted." He extended the envelope like it was a peace offering. "What is it?" I asked, already knowing. "Just a simple agreement," he said. "A formality, to clarify family assets and prevent any future pain." I opened it slowly. Deed transfer agreement. The words screamed from the page, in bold bureaucratic font. Asset clarification. Mutual understanding. Legalese so clean it almost masked the theft. I flipped to the signature page. My name, pre-typed. A dotted line waiting for my consent to disappear. "You want me to sign over the condo?" I said, flatly. Delilah folded her hands in her lap and smiled. "It's just paperwork, sweetheart. You don't even need that much space alone." "You're not even reading it," Orson added. "Don't you trust us?" And there it was. The same manipulation dressed in nicer clothes. Guilt disguised as love. Theft delivered with tea and cookies. I set the papers down gently, just to the left of the porcelain tray. "You invited me here like it was a reconciliation," I said, my voice calm. "The flowers, the photos, the cookies. But this isn't peace. This is theater." Delilah blinked, head tilted, still smiling. "We're just trying to do what's best for the family." "No," I said, standing taller. "You're trying to take the last thing I own that you don't already control." Landon finally spoke. "It's just property, Eliana." I turned to him. "No, it's not. It's about what you think I'm worth." No one followed me as I walked out. No raised voices. No apologies. Just the soft click of the front door closing behind me. And for the first time, I didn't cry. I called Marlowe. He answered on the second ring. "I'm ready," I said. "File everything." The next morning didn't start with sunlight or coffee or even noise. It started with silence. Thick. Intentional. The kind that doesn't just settle in the room, but presses into your skin. I moved slowly, not out of fear but purpose. I was done reacting. Now I was acting. I poured a cup of black tea and let it steep too long. Watched the condensation gather on the kitchen window, as if the world outside didn't want me to see it too clearly. At exactly 9:32 a.m., I walked into Marlowe's downtown office. The air conditioning was too cold, the carpet too clean, and the YAO folder he held in his hand looked heavier than it should have. He didn't waste time. "They left a mess," he said, flipping to the second page. "But here's the good news. You still hold the deed to the house they're living in." I blinked. "You're sure?" He turned the document toward me and tapped the signature line. "You bought it in 2010. Foreclosure rescue. They never transferred it back. They've been living there on assumption, not ownership." I leaned back in the leather chair and let the truth sink in. I hadn't just lost everything. They had, and they didn't even know it yet. I gave them a lifeline, I whispered. They turned it into a noose. Marlowe didn't flinch. "Do you want to pull it?" I didn't hesitate. "Yes, file the eviction." There were no warning shots, no family meetings, no letters with faux concern or staged interventions with trembling voices. This wasn't reality TV. This was reality. 3 days later, the sheriff delivered the eviction notice. I didn't see it in person. But Landon, ever the online documentarian, uploaded the grainy security camera footage to the extended family group chat, as if he were the victim. In the video, Orson opened the door in a wrinkled bathrobe, a piece of toast still in his hand, blinking like he'd just woken up in someone else's nightmare. Delilah stood behind him, frozen with her porcelain mug raised halfway to her lips. The officer handed them a sealed envelope. The mic didn't pick up his words, but it didn't need to. Their faces said enough. Delilah's jaw tightened. Orson scanned the paper, then slammed it against the wall. The video cut off just before the screaming started. I watched it once, then again, then closed the app. That night, I didn't toast. I didn't dance. I didn't even speak. I just sat in my condo, lights off, chamomile in hand, phone face down, and breathed. Because sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's a knock on the door, a folded letter, a key that no longer works, and peace that no longer asks for permission. The condo was quiet again. Not the kind of silence that feels empty, but the kind that belongs to you. I lit a single candle on the kitchen counter, letting the scent of cinnamon drift into corners, still carrying the faint trace of old grief. My phone buzzed once. A message from Thessaly. "They've done worse than you know." Attached was a photo. A dusty family album spread open across her lap. Page after page of memories. But none of me. No birthdays, no graduations, no holidays. Like I had never existed. Her follow-up text came seconds later. "They've been erasing you for years, even from memory." I stared at the image, heart still but heavy. Not shocked, just finally validated. The ache I'd carried for years had never been paranoia. It had a name. It had proof. "Thank you for showing me what I always felt but couldn't prove." Eliana. The next morning, I didn't wake up with dread. I woke up with clarity. I made tea, no rush. Sorted the mail, paid bills, answered Marlowe's email. Sale finalized. Funds wired. You're free. Free. I whispered the word aloud, just to hear how it sounded in a space that no longer belonged to anyone but me. Then, tucked between utility bills and coupon flyers, I found a cream envelope with elegant cursive I recognized instantly. Thessaly. Inside was a baby shower invitation. At the bottom, in her own handwriting, "I'm sorry. I didn't know how far they went. You deserved better. No flourish, no excuses, just truth. I didn't attend." Instead, I wrote a check to a local women's shelter. In the memo I wrote, "In honor of a new beginning. Some stories don't end with fire. Some bridges don't need burning. They just need abandoning." That night I made dinner, simple garlic and thyme pasta. I set 2 plates, not out of habit, but intention. Amina arrived 15 minutes later, carrying a bottle of wine and a tiny orchid, Yuda. "Need more green in here," she said, placing it near the window like she belonged. And maybe she did. We ate slowly, talked about everything and nothing. At some point I looked at the center of the table. where one folded swan napkin sat, soft-edged and imperfect. The same one from that night. The one they left crooked by the kitchen door. It wasn't just a napkin anymore. It was a reminder. I was always here. I always mattered, and I didn't need their approval to take up space. I raised my glass. To building our own tables, I said. Amina clinked hers against mine, and never begging for a seat again. That night, I didn't think about what they lost. I thought about what I reclaimed. My presence, my voice, my worth. The kind of peace that doesn't need permission. The kind of justice that stays, long after the doors close.